I'm Amy Vose, and you're listening to the Builder Podcast, brought to you by the Federation of Master Builders. Back in the studio with me are my co-hosts, Aidan Cropper, Managing Director of IPSUM UK Limited in Nottinghamshire, and David Gutierrez, Director of Nest Building Group in Surrey, both FMB member companies. Now, recent research by Corgi shows a rise in interest in energy efficiency. Nearly a quarter of homeowners are willing to invest in sustainability at home. That's up 8% since 2021. If you're a builder, chances are you're already doing some retrofit work, upgrading insulation, replacing windows, or fitting more efficient heating systems. But learning more about retrofit could help you win new types of work, add value for your clients, and future-proof your business. In this episode, we're exploring how small building companies can tap into this opportunity. We're excited to welcome Rachael Owens from the National Retrofit Hub today. The Hub brings builders together to boost retrofit work and improve the performance of UK homes. Hi, Rachael. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on the podcast.
So, first of all, can you talk us through what exactly retrofit is?
Yeah, absolutely. So retrofit is really making any upgrades to a home or building that will improve the way that it performs. So that might mean improving the energy efficiency to help lower energy bills. It might mean reducing the carbon emissions associated with heating or the hot water in the building. It could mean making improvements to the indoor air quality. That might be through ventilation or other means. Eliminating damp and mold internally. Doing things that might make the building more comfortable, either not too hot and not too cold, and also making it more resilient to events like flooding. It also can include introducing renewable energy like solar panels. So it's a quite broad definition, and it might mean different things for different homes.
And why is it a big opportunity for builders?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing the sector growing, not only because energy prices have been rising, so people are much more aware of their energy bills going up, but also because regulation in the sector is changing as well, which is going to drive more retrofit happening. And we might talk a little bit about that later.
Aidan, David, do you think that builders are already doing retrofit work without sort of calling it that?
Yeah, I think retrofit's been happening for years. Where a client would have an extension built, we were always asked, part of the existing kitchen, for example, wasn't insulated. So what would we recommend? So we would always recommend, look, we'll insulate the existing part of the house so that it's all in one. And then it's kind of gone from there. So without knowing it was retrofit, and now retrofit's such a big thing. And obviously with green skills, it's I think it's very important for people to learn green skills now.
Yeah, massively.
We live in a country of old buildings.
Yeah. I think the other thing as well, clients are like quite well educated now, aren't they? In terms of they want to improve the efficiency of their property. They want to improve. They understand about EPC and SAT ratings now, whereas before I think it was just kind of something that you got when you bought a house. Like they're quite keen to improve the efficiency and get up those ratings. So, but yeah, same as David, we've been doing retrofit, thermal retrofit for a long time, and now we're getting into sort of retrofit flood measures as well, which is quite interesting. So yeah, we are have been heavily involved with it for a while.
And are these kind of upgrades part of regular renovation work then, I suppose?
Yeah, generally, yeah. I mean, quite often, obviously, when we're renovating somewhere, it'll be done to building regulation requirements as well. So quite often, if we're touching part of the building, that would need to come up to current regulations. So part of that, if it's an existing part of the building, would need to be then upgraded to satisfy those regulations. So
I think there's become a bit of a regulation now. I'm not sure, obviously, on the actual terminology and whether this is in effect, but I know that if you are taking on a large renovation project extension, then I think you have to implement some form of retrofit into your existing house now. So I think they're pushing for people to, upgrade that whether it's the thermal value of the house and, like you say, the carbon footprint. If you can reduce that, that's great. So yeah, it's great that they're pushing it.
Well, it's like you say, I think there's a heightened awareness of sustainability and our responsibility with that. So Rachael, how does retrofit tie into the UK's climate goals?
Yeah, so there's a few big reasons why we would want to retrofit, and reducing carbon emissions is one of them. We need to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we produce as a country, and one of the things that we need to do is to decarbonize our homes. That happens through two different sort of routes. One is reducing the amount of energy that our buildings use in the first place, and then the other is switching to low carbon heating. And we really want to do both together so that we can have maximum impact. And for different clients, that might mean you might have different strategies depending on their home and their needs and their own priorities. For some people, that might look like air or ground source heat pumps, district or networked heating, or other low carbon technologies. But there are also some other big drivers of retrofit as well. We know reducing bills is a really big one, and lots of households are living in fuel poverty. So we really need to make changes for them to allow them to live at a comfortable temperature that they can afford. But for other clients who might be extending and remodeling, they might be thinking a bit more about like that long-term payback, and that might be more of a motivation to some of your clients. So thinking about combining a heat pump with solar panels, maybe a battery, maybe they've got an electric vehicle. Sometimes that starts to make a lot of sense for the types of clients who might be doing these extension projects. And I think a lot of the time working in people's homes, you'll know what's best for them. I think the third big reason is also about health. So the way that our homes have an impact on us is huge in terms of our personal health. The BRE thinks that it costs the NHS about £1.4 billion every year to treat people who are affected by poor quality housing. So doing things like removing damp and mold, having really good ventilation systems, improving indoor air quality, thinking about how that home retains heat is all really important when you're thinking about like the personal health of the person that lives in that home. I think also really important to say that, builders are some of the only people that are going into homes and talking to their clients about these improvements. So you're catching people at a really good time to sort of increase their understanding of what their home can do for them. And I think one of the things it'd be great to do is just make sure your existing clients aren't missing out on opportunities. So I think that example of, when you're installing a kitchen is a really good one. Like, you don't want to rip that out in 5 years' time when you're trying to insulate. You want to do that insulation works now. Even little things like when you're remodeling internally, are there airing cupboards that are big enough for when you might transition to a new form of heating kit? Just making sure you're making those like no regrets measures now and baking in that value for your clients.
Well, that's really interesting. I was going to say, why are SME builders well placed to lead in this space? And I guess it's that, like you say, they're in the home. They have the knowledge.
Yeah, not only do they understand the building, they also understand the person that's living in it. They know what their priorities are. They've been talking to them a lot about what their aspirations are for the home, but they're also in a position to sort of expand their view a little bit. Another thing I'd say as well is that if you're doing any repair and maintenance, that can also have a really big impact on the building's performance. So if the walls are damaged, if it needs repointing, if the gutters are leaking, those walls can become wet. And we know that wet walls lose a lot more heat than dry ones do, and they can include a risk of damp and mold inside. So even those repairs we would see as part of a whole sort of retrofit picture.
So we've heard about the opportunities, but how do you start the conversation with your clients? Quick reminder, if you run a building business in the UK, becoming an FMB member means you can advertise on the Find a Builder tool to find new clients. Visit fmb.org.uk/membership to learn more. So why is it worth raising retrofit options with clients, Rachel, even if they haven't asked? What are the benefits and what are the opportunities here?
Yeah, so I think number one benefit is really trying to deliver that value for your client. You're trying to build that trust and make sure that you're offering them all of the potential that the job could bring with it. What you don't want them to do is have to spend money later down the line because something was more expensive to install in, say, 2 years' time than it might be thinking about it now with the works that they're already doing. Can set you apart from other builders and making sure that you are coming across as someone that really understands where things are going, what the latest technologies are, what the latest techniques are. But also I think it's a great space to get started upskilling in, starting to sort of build your capacity in, because we know that the sector is going to grow. There are a couple of big pieces of legislation that have just been consulted on or are being consulted on at the moment, which are going to introduce minimum energy efficiency standards for private rental and social rented homes. That means that all of the rented sector is going to have to reach a certain level of energy performance. So probably about half of the buildings in that sector will need upgrades in order for them to be able to be rented out. So there's a really big sort of swathe of upgrade works coming. New tenancies are going to have to meet those standards, they think, by 2028. So it's quite soon. So if you can start building up experience in this space, I think that there's a growing market coming that you'll be able to sort of tap into as well.
David and Aidan, have you noticed the opportunities? Is this something that you always obviously offer?
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, we did a project recently, and the client was living abroad, and they bought a property in Nottingham, and they wanted to sort of bring the property up from a D to a C. And it was sort of, I mean, it was quite, because the building control wasn't involved at that point, to sort of try and give them options as a builder was quite sort of daunting, even though the works are fairly straightforward. We understand the works. It was quite daunting. So we employed a surveyor that came in, did a SAP assessment, and essentially we worked together to detail what works we were proposing, and the upgrades, which would then give us the C rating, and that gave us a scope of works. And the assessment was probably £200, I think. It wasn't a huge amount of money. And then they came in at the end we took photos, and they came in the end to assess the work. So, and it gave them that C rating. But it was, from my perspective, because when you start the conversation with the client, it's a two-way thing, and I don't think necessarily, you need to really fully understand the building, the fabric of the building, and what it takes to bring it up. So we installed air source heat pump, internal wall insulation. They ended up having PV, but it was all on the back of the assessment that was done and the recommendations within the assessment. So that gave it some, obviously get it credibility, and then we could kind of work off that and provide them with a price. So it worked really well, and I definitely recommend that as a process from the get-go, because it just supports you as a business, and as I say, it starts that conversation.
That's very good practice, because like you say, when we've been involved in, say, a retrofit, we're going off our own knowledge, and you've got to be careful sometimes, and especially like we were hitting on that subject of builders without PI, don't give that the information or advice if you don't know what you're talking about. We live in obviously in South London. There's so many buildings that have no insulation, or the ventilation is obviously the gaps in the windows, right? So all of this upgrade needs to be done. I see a massive rise in this, and I think that as an SME company, you need to jump on this knowledge. There's obviously work to be and money to be made, but also these houses need to be upgraded. I think homes need a passport. That they're going to start asking for a passport, a property passport. If you haven't got a great one, you're going to struggle to sell your property. So there's so many pluses to obviously retrofitting on a consumer point of view, but obviously as a builder point of view, we should be jumping on this a little bit more.
Thinking of that, how can you help clients see the long-term benefits?
It's money, isn't it, for most people? If they can save themselves money in the long run, you would like to say that they would like, we would like to contribute to less carbon and all of that kind of stuff, which is great, and I think that's important. But for a client's point of view, it will be the long term. How much money can we save, and is our house worth that money at the end of it if they've had it done? Yeah. That's really the without beating around the bush. Yeah, that's what they want to hear.
It comes down to and interesting when we had the survey done and they sort of specified these words part of the calculations, SAP calculations, it did give a figure as well, which was quite useful. So it would actually say if you did these works, this is how much you'd save, and things like if you're having PV installed, they'll do a calculation to obviously work out what the return would be and how long it'll take to pay off. So yeah, I mean it is obviously a huge investment, but I think there are also companies out there that will kind of lend on the potential increase in value to do the retrofit works as well. I don't know a huge amount about it, but I know there are sort of potential. You probably know a bit more, Rachel. I don't know whether you've come across these before. But...
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose one of the things I'd say is that also talking to your clients about the comfort benefits. So like the fact that they will feel better in their homes. But yeah, in terms of the finance, there are quite a few green mortgages out there. So essentially their mortgages is where if you're achieving an EPC of A or B, you can get a lower rate. You can also get green loans, which might have a lower interest rate attached to them. So there are lots of products out there. So definitely worth talking to or having clients talk to their mortgage providers to see what they offer, because quite a lot of them do offer these types of products, but people aren't necessarily aware of them. So yeah, lots of different routes to sort of fund the works and have it pay back over time.
Gosh, I did not know that about the mortgage lower rates. That is, that the fact that you're adding value to your property and those selling points like that. But also as a builder, do you think it helps you stand out as a business, that you're able to offer this, and it shows that you're thinking about the project long term as well? Or your home long term.
Yeah. It does make you stand out. And if you can specialize in that field and have that, on your vans and in your website as well, then obviously you're a go-to. I was going to pick up on the point of it's quite sad. I think the government was doing grants, and there's no grants out there that I know of anymore.
Yeah, there are some grants available. So there's the boiler upgrade scheme still out there if you want to switch from a gas boiler to an air source heat pumps. And then there's grants for those that are on lower income. So a lot of the time the eligibility might be, so that boiler upgrade scheme anyone can get. But yeah, the other grants are often based on affordability. So if you're on a lower income and in a lower EPC area, and potentially others, people who are off the gas grid, they can get grants as well. So there are some out there, but maybe not so much for the sort of people who are maybe more classed in the able to pay sector.
I think there's a big opportunity on the plumbing side, because with the air source heat pump that we fitted, they got a £7,500 grant for having the air source heat pump fitted. But I think there's an opportunity there for plumbers as well, because I think there is a little bit of a skills gap as well, possibly in that sector. So for anyone looking to sort of get into air source heat pumps and sort of train up to be able to fit that, I think there's a real big opportunity there. And I'm also finding it with electrical contractors and plumbing contractors, because M&E now is such a big element, sort of mechanical, electrical, and ventilation as well is such a big element of any type of build. There's an opportunity for those contractors to sort of improve their skills, and there's a massive market there for them, for sure.
And how does the grant system, how does that work in terms of for your businesses? How would that work?
I think in this scenario where I think the client just got the grant direct,
right?
So we weren't involved with that. They just applied for the grant and got the £7,500.
And do you ever recommend retrofit surveys to clients?
I personally don't.
I have done in that case. So, I mean that worked, and a few cases since then it's worked. It has worked as a mechanism, I guess, as part of the project. It's worked really well. But that was something that it was almost like a D&B, design and build, from our perspective, where ordinarily, well, not ordinarily, but on a lot of projects, it's architect led. So they would already have done, made those assessments before we get involved, and then they provide us with a specification. But yeah, if you're going out and you're trying to sort of win more work with the client and show them where the upgrades potentially can be, obviously you can make those recommendations, but then get a specialist involved to really nail down the details.
And then what if the client then says that they just don't have the budget for something like insulation?
They don't have the budget, I guess. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, like
How do you get past that? How do you
that's
try and
quite common.
Yeah.
So our clients, or majority of our clients, would rather pay for a new kitchen, a nice floor, new bathroom, an extension, some sliders, a lantern, some lovely lighting, etc., etc. So you, as a consumer, you have to think to yourself, what's more important? Like you were saying, with the comfort of a home in the winter months mainly, unless you have good ventilation or you're okay and you can afford air conditioning, then fine, you're covered. But I think people put comfort at or I would say the practical side of things to one side, and they'd rather the Instagrammable glitz and glam room, and that is the truth.
I think the only thing I would say, like, I completely agree with that, but I think you might have touched on it earlier, Rachel, and you said that sometimes you can put some of the infrastructure in.
Yeah.
So, like you say, a cupboard that you can fit a cylinder in a few years' time or something like that, or it might be just a quick win by insulating the floors, like we were talking about. So I think, or fixing the gutters maybe, which is, it sounds ridiculous, but gutters cause a huge amount of problems.
They're a definite. Roofs, gutters, windows. It's the other stuff that I think the consumer needs to understand as well. So it's down to us builders to articulate that to these guys and say, do you know what? This is just as important, and you'll save money.
Yeah.
And yes, you might not be able to afford the kitchen that you really want if you have to insulate the rest of the house or upgrade your windows or put, an air source heat pump in. Well, you will have to upgrade the windows if you put one of those in because they have to be airtight. I think it's more how we come across and sell this to the clients, how important it is to the property as well.
I think also this is where a really good retrofit assessment and plan can come in, because it might be that, clients' budgets aren't unlimited, but if they've got a plan that comes from that assessment where you can sort of see, okay, well, you could do some things now, but in the future you could add in some other things. At least they've got a sort of long-term vision for what they might be able to do when they might unlock a little bit more money. I think part of it is just making it easier for them as well. Like, not every client really wants to engage with whether they have a combi boiler or a heat pump. It's not that exciting for a lot of people, but I think putting in place the steps that make it easy when, say, their boiler breaks down, they can just switch out to a heat pump without having to go through a lot of stress of having to change, say, the radiator sizes. Thinking about things like that in advance. If you're already changing the radiators, maybe for some nice new ones, are they going to be big enough for when you've got a heat pump? Just so that you're kind of taking away that burden of the client having to think about all of those technical aspects.
That's a really good way of looking at it. My house is terribly insulated, and I know I should get the roof done and all the bits. I'm exactly what you said, David, because, we want to get the kitchen done, but actually, that we spend so much money on electricity and heating, and so noted. Rachel, what are your top tips for getting into retrofit?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of sort of events and training out there. You've mentioned that the FMB website has some resources. Our website, the National Retrofit Hub one, has a list of, it has events, it has webinars that you can view on retrofit. If you want to get a bit deeper into it, we've also got a training and qualifications directory that you can see what types of training are available. I'd say also, like, check out your local colleges. In some areas there might be grant funded, like partially or completely funded courses that you can go on to learn more. And there are some really good hands-on learning centres. So if you're up in Scotland, Best have a great hands-on training hub. Ecological Building Systems to do hands-on training at a few different places. There's some good work going on in East Sussex with their training hub. So there's lots of training out there. But I think also great idea as well to get your clients to see if they can get a retrofit assessment. It might only cost them a couple of £100, but it will really inform like what they do now and what they do into the future, and also help make sure that you're making the right decisions on a project. Because I guess what you don't want to do is to recommend something that isn't going to work or is going to cause unintended consequences. So making sure that you've got that knowledge and you've got that expert support so that you can put in place the right things for your clients.
Just quickly, do you think that we'll ever get a government-backed kind of campaign with retrofit? Because it's becoming more and more important. So I suppose like a cheeky advert or something, think long term, don't be short-sighted or something like that.
I don't know how well they've publicised them, but they did run they have just ran a campaign. It's called the Warm and Fuzzy campaign. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a government campaign that they've ran on. I've seen it on social media. Maybe they had TV adverts, and it was sort of had these like knitted people.
I do remember something like knitted people. So
I think that was one that they ran, but there's definitely more that could be done. We know that the government are working on the Warm Homes Plan at the moment, and that should be published by the end of October. So we might find some more details out in that, because I know a lot of the industry have been saying to the government, come on, we also need you to do some awareness raising, some campaigns to like build that demand for citizens.
Well, we need, like you say, we need to retrofit so many properties. London in a whole is just a a beautiful city with so many old buildings, and there's properties that are unlivable. There's families that are not, they're living in properties that are just damp and moldy, and it's terrible. So I suppose it sort of coincides with, and sorry for using like sort of my area as a target, but if builders in a whole had a back-in with, say, something like congestion charge, or all these extra charges for us builders to go into these cities, which I think's unfair, that again we have to put onto our bills, and these people can't afford their retrofit work. So can we get, if you're listening, the government, can you back us up a little bit? Help us.
It's such a good point as well, because I think, local authorities and housing providers do probably quite a lot of retrofit already, but quite a lot of the time they end up going to a tier 1 contractor because they might not have the internal resource themselves to be able to manage the whole process, or the procurement that they have in place sort of forces them along that tier 1 route. And one of the things we've been really advocating for is changing that procurement, upskilling those housing providers so that they can engage more with SMEs, because we think that would be such a great way to try and sort of build skills and knowledge locally, and make sure that businesses like your own can access more of that work that's already going on. But yeah, great idea about the congestion charge and making it more cost effective to work in cities, because they are some of the places that need a lot of work.
Yeah, but even around the country, sort of, if the license to build scheme came into effect, that's another thing that, if you're a licensed builder and you're upskilling your workforce and all of that kind of stuff.
I think they're looking into that for retrofit as well, aren't they? I think there's talks at the minute about some almost like a licensing type scheme, but for retrofit.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Is there anything at the minute, Rachel? I mean, there's no past 2035, but I don't know. Is there anything on for the stuff that we're kind of doing in terms of domestic upgrades?
Well, yeah, it's a really good point. It's kind of fragmented the sort of whole quality assurance landscape. So there's the PAS 2030, 2035 process where you might be lodging with Trustmark, and lots of the time that's mandated on sort of government grant funded schemes. So in the social housing sector, or if you're having another grant, you might have to follow that process, which means you have to have certain people on the team who have a certain amount of competence, and you've got to follow different steps. But for lots of the sort of able to pay sector, people aren't necessarily following those routes because they don't have to, and sometimes they can be more complicated or cost more money. I know as Federation of Master Builders have been campaigning for licensing in this space, and we think that would be a really positive movement to make sure that we're really respecting the skills that come with being a builder, and making sure that we're acknowledging those, and that people with the right skills, the right competency, are doing the right work. So I think the government acknowledges it, the industry acknowledges it, that we do need change in that space to bring quality across the board.
I think you also touched on the bit in terms of sort of public sector and housing associations, and so I'm involved a little bit with that as well. And I'm doing some work for Nottingham Community Housing Association, and there's a guy called Chris there who's a sustainability manager, and he's really proactive in this field and looking to really retrofit a lot of their existing housing stock. Now I've kind of got involved with that a little bit as well, and I would say to some of the FMB members, maybe reach out to those housing associations, because they really struggle. I know you mentioned tier 1s earlier, but a lot of the tier 1s don't necessarily, they're almost too big for that type of work, and there's definitely a market there for micro and SMEs to really access that work, and I think they would be open to that as well, especially backed with your conversations that you're having. So I definitely sort of recommend reaching out to those housing associations locally to their areas.
Yeah, 100%. There's a really nice example. Believe Housing, who are a registered provider, have this project where they've partnered a tier 2 contractor called Regen, with 3 different SMEs who have got less experience in the retrofit space, and they've baked into the contract that the tier 2 contractor has to support the SMEs to upskill in retrofit, so that they'll still be there in the area able to deliver more of this work once that contract finishes. So we really think that sort of thing is amazing. I want to see more of it.
Rachael, thanks so much for joining us today. Where can people find you online if they want to connect and find out more?
Yeah, please do go to our website, nationalretrofithub.org.uk. We've got a newsletter you can subscribe to where we sort of give updates every week about all the latest things going on in retrofit. We're also on LinkedIn and Instagram, so please do follow us on there as well.
Brilliant. And thank you to my two trusty co-hosts, Aidan and David. Where can listeners connect with you both, guys? Give yourselves a little little plug.
So my company is IPSUM UK, and you can find us at ipsumuk.com and on Instagram and all the socials as well.
David Gutierrez, Nest Building Group, and you can find us on www.nestbuildinggroup.com if you want to reach out and contact us. We're on socials as well as.
Now, if you're quoting for work, we've got a free FMB approved quotation template packed with retrofit considerations. You can download it at fmb.org.uk/quote and let us know your thoughts. Email buildup@fmb.org.uk. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when the next episode drops. Thanks for joining us on the Build Up podcast, brought to you by the FMB. Join Aidan, David and me next time for more tips and ideas to help your business. We'll see you then.